Hello, I'm Cal Wellborn, acarologist with the Florida Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services, Division of Plant Industry in Gainesville, Florida. Okay, now we're going to key out the genus Allonychus. At this point, we will assume you already know it's a Tetranychidae, and I'll briefly review the characters of Tetranychidae. One of the key characters of Tetranychidae is the movable digit. The movable digit of the chlystra is long and has a proximal hook. In addition, the chlystral bases are fused into a retractile stylophore. The stigmatal opening is anterior at the base of the chlysary, and the paratremes go up and onto the anterior part of the prodorsum. There's one paratreme, and there's the other one. In addition, the palps are what we call thumb claw. Here's your palp, there's the other palp. This is your palp genu. There's your palp tibia, that's your palp tarsus, and there's your palp tibial claw-like seta. It's a modified seta, but it looks like a claw. Here's your other palp, genu, tibia, tarsus, claw. So characteristics of Tetranychidae include thumb claw, long stylet-like chlysary with a proximal hook, paratremes that are on the anterior portion of the mite, stigmata between the chlystral bases. In this case, the chlystral bases are fused into a stylophore, and there are 3 or 4 pairs of prodorsal setae, none of which are trichobothria, and they're your eyes. There's usually 2, but one shows up more prominently than the other. You already know this mite is a Tetranychidae. Now we're going to follow it through the key to get to the genus Allonychus. In couplet 1, we're separating the 2 subfamilies of Tetranychidae. And the first couplet is impodium usually present and without tented hairs. Impodium may also be absent. Females with 1 or 2 pairs of anal setae, males with 4 pairs of genital anal setae, versus impodium always with tented hairs, females with 2 or 3 pairs of anal setae, and males with 5 pairs of genital anal setae. So we're going to look at the impodium, and usually you have to look at several legs to see a good view of the impodium. In this case, we're operating at 40x. This is a good view of pretarsus leg 2. You can see the claws. They're actually, this tiny little nub there is the claw, and the tented hairs coming off of it. There's the other claw with tented hairs. And the structure in the middle is the impodium, but you don't see any tented hairs coming off of it. Let's look at another one that might be better view. This is leg 3. It's a little better. You see 1 pair of claws with tented hairs. Here's the impodium, and you don't see any tented hairs coming off the impodium. If you look very carefully in this view basally, you'll see a few little hairs coming off. Find a better view. Here's leg 4. There's the view of leg 4, distal end of leg 4. It comes around, loops here. Here we can see the impodium very clearly. Here's the impodium, and you see the structure coming off near the base with all the little hairs coming off of it. This is called proximal ventral hairs. They don't have tips on them. They're not tented hairs. These are proximal ventral hairs. Now let's look at the genital region. Now we'll look at the genital region, and there should be 1 or 2 pairs of anal setae. Here we have the genital region, and you can tell very clearly from the convoluted cuticle here that this is a female. Here's your genital setae. Your adgenitals are up here. This is your genital flap. Your pregenital striations are here. This is your anus. Here's the 2 pairs of anal setae, 1, 2. So it has 2 pairs of anal setae, does not have any tented hairs on the impodium, and the impodium is well developed. So it's Tetranychinae subfamily. Now we move on to couplet 2, impodium claw-like, split distally, tarsus leg 1 with 1 or 2 pairs of duplex setae, and tarsus 2 with 1 pair of duplex setae. We'll go back to leg 1 now. This is tarsus leg 1. This is a ventral view. So we want to focus to the dorsal side because that's where the duplex CD are located. And if we look carefully here, right in here, we see one pair of duplex CD. You can see the two bases are adjacent. And right about here is the other pair of duplex CD. You can't see it as clearly as the other pair, but there are two pairs of duplex CD. And we saw the impodium is not split distally. In this view, you can see that the impodium is entire. Just had the proximal ventral hairs that we saw in the other view. Now we should look at tarsus leg 2. See how many duplex CD are there. And there's one right there. Remember, the duplex CD are made up of a solonidian and a small adjacent seta. The setal bases actually touch. Okay, so we're moving on to couplet 3. We're looking at the F seta. See where they are. Right here is where the dorsal sagittal furrow would be. This is your prodorsum. This is your opistosoma. There's your 1, 2, 3 pairs of prodorsal CD. One over here, 2, 3, and the eyes. So this has to be the C1 pair of CD. C1, D1. Now the CD is missing here, but you still have the base. There's D1, E1. F1, the CD is missing, but the base is still there. And H back here. So C, D, E, F. Whereas, if you notice, C, D, F are mostly aligned. That's the normal position. If they were not aligned, these FCD would be, F1 would be out here somewhere or absent. This is F2. So it's normal position. Now we need to know how many HCD are present. These are the F1s, F2s. So anything posterior to that will be H. There's one pair of H's. Usually the second pair is more ventral. So we're going to focus to the ventral side. And there we have H2. These are PS's. These are genitals. This structure here is a dorsal seta. It's actually F2 dorsally. But you need to make sure when you make your slides, you don't squish them too much so you can't tell the difference between dorsal and ventral. So we have one pair of H's and the other pair of H's. So two H's. So we move on to couplet 5. Impodial claw with proximal ventral hairs, duplex CD on tarsus, distal and adjacent. Okay, now we're going to look at the impodium again. And this is leg 4. Here's your impodium. And you see this structure coming off with all the little hairs coming off the distal end. This is impodium with proximal ventral hairs. Okay, duplex CD on leg 1. It says they're supposed to be distal and adjacent, but they're relatively distal and close together. This character doesn't always work for every species of Allonychus, but it's usually a good indicator. Now we'll go back. Okay, the next couplet is couplet 6. We're looking at how many pairs of anal CD they have, the mite has. So focus on the anal region. And the choices are one pair or two pairs. And you can see there's one pair, two pairs. Two pairs of anal CD. We move on. Opistosoma with 9 pairs of dorsal CD versus opistosoma with 10 pairs of CD. Now there's a little trick to this. You can count them, but in reality, what is missing is C2. So really, rather than count them, we can just look for C2. Here's your dorsal sagittal furrow. This is your prodorsum up here. So this is a C1 pair of CD, C2, and in this case, C3 is way off here on the margin. C3, C2, C1. Go to the other side since they're in multiples. C1, C2. All right, on this side I don't see C3. C1, C2, C3 should be over in here somewhere, but I don't see it. Could be behind the leg there, under the leg. That's probably where it was, right there. It's broken. There's the base, right there. Broken base. So it broke off. Usually if a CD breaks off, you can find the base. Now we can just count the CD. 1, 2, 3. This one on the edge here, the C3. Now we're going to move down to the next row. That's D1, D2, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 pairs. So we have 10 pairs, and C2 is present. So we move on to the next couplet. All legs, or most of them, with the impodial claws as long or longer than the proximal ventral hairs, versus all legs, or most of them, with the impodial claws nearly as long as proximal ventral hairs. It gets a little difficult sometimes if you don't have a good view of the impodium. So what we're saying here is for Allonychus, the claw from here out to the end is longer than the proximal ventral hairs. So from the whole claw is longer than these proximal ventral hairs. In Allonychus, impodial claw is as long or longer than the proximal ventral hairs. So this is Allonychus. Key thing for Allonychus, if you just for identification, once you know it's a Tetronychus, Tetranychine, you can very easily determine whether it's Allonychus or not by first looking at the impodial claw for proximal ventral hairs and how many HCD are present. There's another genus that has proximal ventral hairs that's relatively common. It's common past Panonychus. It's very similar to Allonychus, except it has 3 pairs of HCD, whereas Allonychus only has 2 pairs of HCD. So Allonychus, it's one of the larger genera. It's relatively easy to identify once you know it's a spider mite. So it has 2 pairs of HCD versus Panonychus, which has 3 pairs of HCD. To identify Allonychus species, you must have a male mounted laterally. Any questions?